So I'm glad you guys are here. My name is Wes. I'm one of the teaching pastors here. And man, tonight we're finishing up the last week of our Glow series. I feel like we've been in this series for a while, and we're finally wrapping it up. This idea of what it looks like, really kind of the idea of that video, of what it looks like to be light in this world. That we are surrounded by a world of darkness, that we're surrounded by a world that is far from God, and yet we are called to be the light. I think, man, just in that thought, that's like a powerful message. I just think, like, even if we just, like, grabbed a hold of that, of what Jesus is trying to tell us, he says, like, you are the light and you overcome, is huge. So we're going to finish that up this week. Next week, we're starting a new series. So invite your friends next week. It's going to be awesome. It's a dating series called Blurred Lines. Jordan's going to be kicking that off, so you definitely don't want to miss that. It's going to be sweet. You guys all going to be here? Man, like, the heat is getting to us. That's all right, man. I'm tired just from, like, spike ball. I'm hitting, like, I'm like a year away from 30, and now I play spike ball, and I get tired. Actually, we had a dudes all-nighter this week, and I think, to be honest, like, I'm still, like, half recovering from that. Like, staying up one night, I think, kind of messed me up, which is weird. Like, when I was 22, I could do that so easily, and now, like, as I get closer and closer to 30, like, one night can jack me up. But hey, if you guys have your Bibles, let's go ahead and turn to Isaiah, all right? So if you have an app on your phone, go ahead and turn there. If you have the actual Bible, turn there. Otherwise, it'll be on the screens. And this verse, like that, this verse really kind of inspired that video that we saw. And I think, man, this is some powerful stuff. And when we read this, I want you to imagine your generation, all right? I want you to imagine this verse as your generation. Isaiah 59, verse 8. Everybody there? Cool. It says this. It says, the way of peace they do not know. There is no justice in their paths. They have turned into crooked roads. No one who walks among them knows peace. So justice is far from us, and righteousness does not reach us. We look for the light, but all is darkness. For brightness we walk in deep shadows. Like the blind, we grope along the wall, feeling our way like people without eyes. At midday, we stumble as if it were twilight. Among the strong, we are like the dead. And I read something like that, and I think, like, that speaks to our world. I think that speaks to our generation. I think this is the exact spot that we're stuck in our country, and especially, like, you guys as young people, I think your generation. I think we're caught up in this idea of darkness, and we stumble along. We're, like, trying to find our way, right? Like, I think we live in a world now, especially with the young people, that, like, we think that we know. We think that we know how to get there. We think that we know the right path, and all we end up doing is stumbling along and trying to find our way like those without eyes. We're stuck in the darkness. And I think the reality is, like, we see this in our world. I think we see the darkness. I don't think this is, like, something new for us, right? I think we look at Waukee and we see the 4 suicides that have already taken place this year, and we see the darkness in that, right? We see the hurt and the pain that comes from that. Some of us had to go to those funerals and see those parents and see those families, and it's hard and it hurts. You're like, this is not right. This is not the way the world should work. We have friends that are caught up in partying or drugs or sex, or some of us are, like, caught up in that stuff. And we know that it's not the way. We know we're just, like, groping along the wall, trying to find our way. We know it's not ultimately going to lead us anywhere, but we're still trying to find the light that way, and it just doesn't seem to work. We're just stuck in darkness. I think you look at the divorces in our culture, and you think, man, this is not the way that God had it set up. I think you look at the hurt and the pain, you think, man, we are definitely stuck in darkness. And I read a verse like that, and I think, man, that speaks to us. I think we live in a world that is desperate for justice, but they don't know what justice looks like, right? We see all the race riots. Like, the race riots, like, they started just outside my hometown. I was born in St. Louis. Ferguson is right there, and, like, these race riots break out, and people are getting killed, and people are getting hurt. They're breaking out in Baltimore. They're breaking out all over. And you think, people are desperate for justice, right? People are desperate for justice, but they don't know what it looks like. And so their best idea is just to harm others because they have to feel like they accomplished something. You look at our world and you look at like the murders that are taking place and the hurt that's taking place and you go, man, we are desperate for it, but like it's nowhere to be found, right? It says that they stretch out their arms trying to seek justice, but they can't find it. It says we're like desperate for this idea of peace. I think this is right. Like if any of you guys have watched any of the political debates, one of the things that they talk about again and again and again is when are we going to bring our people home? No more boots on the ground. When are we going to bring our people home? We're desperate for this idea of peace, but we don't know what it looks like. Even in our homes, we want to experience peace. In our relationships, we want to experience peace, but what do we do more often than not? We break apart and we fight and we get angry. We're a generation that's desperate for it, but we can't find it. We're searching in the darkness like those without eyes, trying to find this idea of justice, trying to find this idea of peace because we understand that somewhere deep inside that these things make sense, and yet we can't find them. We attempt to figure it out, but all we end up doing is stumbling along. And so I was thinking about this today, and I thought, man, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for us in this room today? What can we really do about that? Because I think we live in a society that will tell you you don't have a voice. I think we live in a society that tells you that there's not a whole lot you can do about it, that you just have to accept it and move forward. That you really can't create any kind of real change in our world, that your friends are just going to be how your friends are, and our world is just going to be how our world is, and our families are just going to be how our families are, and we can't create any sort of real change. We don't have any sort of real voice. But I think those of us that are in this room, those of us that, man, we believe in Jesus, that we believe that he really did die for us. That we really do believe that the one that created the stars is the same God that came to the earth and bore our scars. Like, if we really believe that, I think that we have a special calling on our life. I think we're truly set aside for something. I think we really are the ones to change a generation. And man, if there's anything that I can get you guys to get out of this Glow series, this whole idea that we are lightness in the darkness, if there's anything I can impart in you guys that you guys can hold on to, is this idea that, man, we really are called to that. That we really are called to be light in the darkness. And in some crazy way, even if the light is small, that somehow this light will overcome the dark. In 1 Thessalonians 5:5, it says, "For you are all children of light, children of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness." Philippians 2:14 says this, "Children of God, without blemish, in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine like stars in the world." This is what you guys are called to be. This is like what all this cultivates to, is that you guys are called to be this light in the darkness. That even though the dark looks unbearable, even though you just see everybody just kind of groping along the wall, just trying to find their way, they can't see anything, they can't figure anything out. They're like the ones without eyes trying to find their way. That you are a light in this world. That you are called to lead them. That you're like called to lead a generation. And I think so often, like when we hear that, we hear those words and we think, that sounds nice, but I don't really want to take that sacrifice. I don't really want to make that move. Or maybe we don't even believe that it's truly possible, right? Maybe part of us thinks that sounds nice, like it'd be cool if something happened in my high school. It'd be cool if something happened in my family. It'd be cool if something happened in the city, but I don't really believe that it could. I'm not totally convinced that it could. And man, I want us to be a people, I want us to be a student body that we believe that we reach out for that. I don't know if you guys have seen some of the stuff that's taken place in our world. Jordan was talking about it a little bit on Sunday, but there's like some crazy stuff happening in West Virginia right now. Have any of you guys been looking this up at all? No? It is absolutely insane. There's like these massive revivals that are taking out amongst the high schools in West Virginia right now. And so let me read this real quick. So there is a student-led revival that took place in the school hallway. How crazy is that? On March 24th. So this junior, Skylar Miller, drew a sizable crowd of students who settled on the floor of the school hall and listened to him preaching. Get this, right? Like, understand this. Here is a high school junior that just started preaching in the middle of his hallway. Dude, that takes some cojones, right? Like, that takes some guts. Who knows what's going to happen, right? Who knows? Is he going to get made fun of? Is no one going to talk to him again? Is this like the end of like his high school career? Like, what happens to him? And so there must have been, I haven't seen any interview with him. I was trying to find one. But there must have been something in him that just didn't care, that he was willing to put it all out there. He didn't care if he got made fun of. He didn't care if he lost friends over it. He didn't care if he wasn't popular anymore after this. Like, there was something on his heart that he had to get out. And what was on his heart was Jesus. And so he looked at his high school. He looked at these people that are walking the halls every day. Man, he looked at these people that are going to parties every weekend thinking, maybe this is the weekend that I'll feel better about my life. Maybe this is the weekend that I'll feel better about myself. And every single weekend, it doesn't work. And they walk away with their stories that they embellish, but that's all they have. They don't have any hope. They don't have any freedom. They're a slave to it. He looks at these people that walk the hallways every single day, that they do drugs, trying to make themselves feel something. And maybe for a moment it does, but it never lasts. It's always fleeting. It always just leaves. But they so desperately want to feel alive. They so desperately want to feel cared for. They so desperately want hope. He watched all these students walk the hallways, these ones that have no friends and no one seems to care about them. Everybody just makes fun of them. They're the ones on the verge of suicide. And he looks at these kids walking these halls every single day, and he said, man, they desperately need something that I have. And I don't care what it costs me. And he started preaching. How crazy is that? Like, can you even imagine that taking place in your high school? Like, for real, can you imagine seeing one of your friends doing that or you yourself doing that? That this kid is willing to stand up in the hallway of his high school and start preaching. And they said people started coming in droves, like people started standing all around him until eventually they just all had to sit down in the hallway because more and more people were coming in to hear what happened. And you know why? I think it's because we're a generation that's desperate for hope. I mean, you read this verse in Isaiah, and I think that speaks to us, and I think we are desperate to find the light. We have no idea where it is, and we're groping along the wall trying to find it. And here's this student in the middle of their high school showing them, here's the light. Here's something that's going to satisfy you. Here's something that's going to give you hope. Here's something that's going to make you feel loved and cared for, and it won't be gone the next day. And I said, so they start gathering around him. On April 13th, so this is just like this last month, right? On April 13th, 150 of these high school students were saved during this random meeting that he took place in his hallway. Could you imagine that? Like, seriously, think about your high school. Think about your junior high. Think about one of your friends or you yourself standing up in your high school hallway or junior high hallway, and you start speaking about Jesus, and you watch 150 people give their life to Christ. That's insane, right? That's like 10 times more people that are sitting here right now, like gave their life to Christ in one moment. That's an intense thought if you think about it, right? On April 16th, so just a few days later, nearly 3,000 people attended a Saturday night evening rally at the stadium at this high school. And they're doing this every night. I don't know if it's still going, but for a while there, every single night, they were having this rally take place at the high school, and they were seeing kids come to Christ, and they were seeing kids like change their lives. They're seeing students like want to become like followers of Christ. I think, man, this is a story that we read, and it's cool, and it's exciting, but this could be your guys' story. This could be your guys' high school. This could be your guys' junior high. Because the same problems that they have in West Virginia, we have here. The same things they struggle with, we struggle with. Just how they struggle with suicides, we struggle with suicide. Just how they struggle with drugs, we struggle with drugs. Just how they struggle with parties, we struggle with parties. Just how they struggle with feeling angry and bitter and unforgiving, like we struggle with those same things. Just like how they desperately needed the light, and when someone was willing to speak it out, they couldn't get enough of it. It's the same way for us here. If we would honestly be willing to step up into our generation and say, man, God has something huge for you. God loves you and cares about you. I don't care what things you've done in your past and what things you're ashamed of. God cares about you. And I think, man, how desperately do they need it? And I can get it. I can empathize with them because I was one of those students. I was one of those students that I thought, man, if I partied enough, if I did enough drugs, if I did enough alcohol, if I was cool enough, if I was popular enough, that somehow I'd feel better about myself. And I'd feel good and I'd feel happy and I'd feel satisfied. And you know what? No matter how much I did it, it didn't. It didn't work. It didn't satisfy. Maybe it did for a moment. Maybe it did for a weekend, but it never lasted. It never lasted until I found Christ. It never lasted until I found Jesus, that I actually felt I was worthy of something. I was loved, I was cared for. And I think we live in a generation that is so desperate for that. And man, I wonder what that would look like if we were willing to step into that. Is it really 7:32 already? Holy cow. I wonder what that would look like if we were willing to step into that. If we were a student body that was willing to say, man, I do not care what it costs me because, man, I see these people walking the halls. And I know it means far more to tell them about Christ than it could possibly cost me. Because I have a feeling, and I felt this way for years, that our nation is on the verge of a youth revival. I really believe that. And it sounds stupid and it sounds silly, but I really believe it. I think we are primed for it. I think we live in a generation that no other generation has had access to the things that we have access to. There's been no generation before you guys that can instantly network to anybody on any part of the earth in a millisecond. That's never happened before. Vince, was that a part of our generation? No. This is you guys are a part of something special. You guys are a part of something that has never happened before, that I think if you guys really got a hold of it, if you guys really took it seriously, man, we would see that happen here. We would see high schools on fire for Christ here. We would see changes in our world here. And I read this story in West Virginia. It started with just one, but it became a movement. Eventually, people came around him and they got excited and they started moving it forward. And I wonder who's going to be the one in Des Moines. Because I think it's going to happen eventually. I'm not just blowing smoke. I don't know if it'll be through us or if it'll be through someone else, but I believe it's going to happen here. I see it all the time. Vince is nodding, dude, I see it too. I see it here all the time, and I wonder who's going to be the one to step up. Because here was one guy, this Skylar kid that was man, I'm willing to do it. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm willing to do it. And he stepped up, and it created a movement in West Virginia. And I wonder, man, who's going to be the one to step up in Des Moines and create a movement here? Will it be one of you? I hope so. I believe so. I think you guys have greatness on your life. I think what that video says is true because of what Christ has done in you. You are a legend. You are primed to do something great. You are primed to live out your destiny. It's a destiny that was written long before you were even born. This is what I think is so cool about the Bible. This is what I think is so cool about Scripture, and what's so cool about Christ when he fulfilled it, is that there's stuff written about your life before you were even born. There was a destiny placed on you before you were even born. There was prophecy that was put on your life before you were even born. In Matthew 5:14, it says this. Think about this. This is before you were born, and Christ already had this idea for your life. He says, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds, and they may glorify your Father in heaven. Long before you were born, Long before you made mistakes that like you wish you could take back. Long before like you realize like, man, this Jesus thing is true and I love him and I want to live my life for him. Long before maybe you walk in here and you're still deciding that and you're like, I don't know, maybe it's me. Long before any of that, it was written about you that you would be the light of the world. That there would be this world of darkness and you would step into it as the light. That you would be a lamp on a stand and you would give light to the entire house. You know what that means? That means you're a lamp on a stand that gives light to your entire generation. This isn't something you cover up. This isn't something you're ashamed of. But you give light to your generation. I've always thought this was like one of the most amazing things. That this is how much Christ cared about you and knew about you and loved you and predestined you to be long before like you sit here in this room. Like he knew the greatness that you would live out. He says, you are called to be the light of the world. You are called to be this lamp on a stand. This is us. We're called to be light in the world of darkness. That Isaiah verse ends like this. So it goes through this whole idea of judgment and hurt and pain, and they're groping along the walls, and eventually they find righteousness, which is a symbol of Christ, right? It says in Isaiah 60, arise, shine, for light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. This is you, but it speaks to our generation, a generation that's so lost in the dark, that's so dead, that's so hurting. He says, arise because Christ is here. Arise because his glory is on you. This is what you guys have been called to do. So, man, I want you guys to grab hold of that. And I want this to be something that excites you to the point that you are willing to put it on the line in your high school, that you're willing to put it on the line in your junior high, that you're willing to put it on the line with your friends because you know what that world so desperately needs. You know what your family so desperately needs. You know what like these kids and these students that walk the halls every day so desperately need because you found it. And now it's up to you to continue to shine that light.